Hey folks, Lenny Lawson here, the Car Guru, and today we're going to talk about failure. Yeah, doesn't that sound exciting? No, we're going to talk about the importance of failure and what power it has to change your life in a positive way. Isn't that weird? And then also we're going to talk about another kind of failure, and these are mechanical failures, something that you need to be aware of if you're interested in buying a Hyundai, a Kia, or a used Chevy Silverado, or GMC Sierra, or a Toyota Tundra. Because at one time, the most reliable part of a vehicle was the engine. That was back before they were really complicated like they are now. Because all of the advances to be able to make engines smaller, more fuel efficient, but at the same time, make them more powerful, a lot of changes had to be made. One of those changes was making them lighter, making engine blocks out of aluminum, changing proven designs like the venerable Chevrolet small block V8. They call it a pushrod engine, and going from that engine design to overhead cam engines. Now, I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts, no pun intended, how it's designed and how it functions. Just understand that this complexity is driving up initial cost, what it costs to buy a new vehicle, and also the potential repair cost once it runs out of warranty. But in particular, there are three major companies that are having a real struggle right now because they're having to replace a lot of engines that have failed, and they are also having major recalls that can definitely damage their reputation. So we'll get into that. But first, let's just talk about failure in general and how you respond to it. Now, I've got a lot of weaknesses. I've got a lot of faults, but one of them is not that I don't know how to maneuver, because I had to be able to. There were multiple times in my business career where we were headed down the wrong path, and we almost lost it all several times. My dad, during the early 70s, the energy crisis, he had a lot of money borrowed in order to buy the dealership. And the people he borrowed the money from was a division of General Motors called Motors Holding. And they tracked the earnings per share and the stock value. And if the stock value of the company at that time had fallen $1 more per share, they were going to close the dealership. And when they closed it, they would kick my dad out, and they would bring somebody else in to try to run the dealership and turn it around. Well, there was a big recession going on. There were gas lines. I mean, it was just a terrible time for the car business. The cars were crappy, and they were wrong for what we needed. He had this big energy crisis, and we were selling Chevy Vegas at the time, and they weren't really good cars. That's an understatement. But we had to do what we could, or what he could, to survive. I remember he developed a rash, a really bad rash on his hands. I think it was some form of psoriasis, but the doctor said that it was caused by stress. And I was in high school. I didn't know what was going on. He maintained a normal life for us, but he was suffering. But he was able to maneuver and able to survive. And then later on in the early 80s, had another recession. We survived that on our own, but there were other situations later on in that decade that made survival on our own very difficult. So we had to get partners at that time. It was very difficult. It was an emotional blow to have to do that because we always wanted to be relying on ourselves. But we couldn't. We had to maneuver. And so I could have, and Dad could have felt like failures, but if you wallow in that enough, you start to believe that you are one. And we knew that we weren't. We knew we had abilities and strengths, and we had the knowledge to be able to pull ourselves out of it if we could only have the capital to do it, and so which is money. So we got the capital, and we took right off and did great. And then the worst thing that happened to us, I guess, was when the Great Recession hit in 2008, 2009, and we had expanded to over 5 different dealerships, and it hit us like a ton of bricks. And we had to figure out a way to survive that. We had partners at that time. And, the thing about that partnership at that time was that we knew that we were all in this together, and that was the only way that we were going to survive, was to work together. And we could have felt like failures. We could have folded it and just, started over and come back if we could. But we decided just to fight the battle, and we survived it. We divided our large company into 3 parts. I took one part, another guy took another part, another guy took the third part. And we were able to survive. But there were times it really looked bleak because, during the Great Recession, the banks were shut down. Nobody was loaning money. We had to go to the banks and get them to make concessions for us so that we could survive, and we had to present a business plan to them. And so I've got the book over in my shelf. We actually wrote a book with graphs and charts and what our plans were, and we had to present it to the different banks that were doing business with the 5 different dealerships. And I even put a title on the book. It was called Global Solutions. And I get that out occasionally and look at it. Kind of get that same feeling in the pit of my stomach when I look at that as I had back then, because it wasn't a pleasant time. It was very hard. It was very hard physically and emotionally. But the plan worked. We focused on survival, and we found a way to sell it. It had to be sold to these banks. And they bought it because of one reason, and that was our character. It wasn't because it looked all that feasible, because the odds were against us at the time. General Motors was canceling dealership franchises left and right. Thank goodness they didn't cancel ours. We were high enough volume, but we were at the lower end. We were in jeopardy there as far as the Chevy. Well, there were 2 Chevy dealerships involved at that time. And so, we just had to figure out a path that the banks would be willing to accept. But like most of them said, the only reason we're doing this is because of you guys. We believe in you. We wish you the best. And so we survived it. And that's why I'm sitting here today doing My Car Guru and also running a new car dealership that we're successful now. We're a Ford and we're Nissan, and it's a family business. And I can wear tennis shoes to work if I want to, or blue jeans, and my kids can run things as long as I stay in touch. And what a blessing that is, for all of us. But, it was a trial that could have led to failure, but we were determined not to let that happen. We buckled down. And sometimes that's what you got to do. You got to rally together, you got to buckle down and come up with a plan and not just wallow in fear and distrust and hurt feelings and that type of thing. So if you're going through something like that, of course, prayer has a tremendous power over that, and we were on our knees a lot during that time. And I remember my wife would come and get me. I'd not be in bed, and she would come looking for me, and I'd be in the chair. It'd be 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting there reading a book by Norman Vincent Peale called The Power of Positive Thinking. I lived in that book. I lived in the Bible. I lived in another book called Abundant Living by E. Stanley Jones. These are old preachers that long since dead, but their messages still echo today for those who are willing to seek them out and find them. I found them in my dad's bookcase in his office and just started devouring them, and they really helped move me along from a mental standpoint and helped give me the strength that I needed to be able to face the battles that I would face each and every day during that time. So, that kind of adversity is a whole lot more serious than somebody having a problem with their car or their brakes. But, some of those problems can wreak havoc on your personal life. I call it your car life. And so one of the things I want to do through this program is to warn folks, things they need to look out for, and we'll get into one of them here in just a minute. Okay, I am back. We talked yesterday about how to avoid a problem vehicle. That's what I'm going to try to help you do right now. Because if you're in the market for a used vehicle, there's certain ones that you need to stay away from, or you need to make sure that the issues that they had with this particular manufacturer, or these particular manufacturers had with these vehicles, have been remedied. And in some cases, as with Kia and Hyundai, the remedies are failing. So Hyundai and Kia have faced significant issues with their engines, particularly the 2-liter and the 2.4-liter GDI engines. And they have led to both engine failures and fires. Now, what's happening to these engines? Well, they've got defects in the connecting rod bearings. Now, that's a very important, very high-stress part of the engine that if it fails, it leaves metal debris in the engine and leads to potential issues with the oil pump. It can lead to engine seizures, stalling. I've talked to so many people that own these Hyundais and Kias that have had them in the shop, or they have oil consumption problems and they just don't know what to do. The company has stepped up in some cases, but in many cases they have not, and they just left the people stranded. But this is 2011 through 2020 model years for both Hyundai and Kia. So if you're looking at buying a used one, you better make sure that something was done, that it had a new engine, or that the repairs were made that needed to be made, because if it wasn't, you're going to have some serious problems with this. Now, if you're the original owner of one of these vehicles, then you've probably been notified by the company with recalls. Additionally, class action lawsuits have been filed on behalf of affected owners, and so they're seeking compensation for repairs that they have already paid for, or to try to get extended warranties and other expenses. Before you buy any 2011 through 2020 Kia or Hyundai, you need to call a Kia or a Hyundai dealer and ask them to check the VIN and see what the history is on the vehicle that you're thinking about buying. So that's Hyundai and Kia. There's another big company that has had tremendous problems with engines, and it's a surprising name, and that's Toyota. Recently, Toyota has recalled 102,000 22 through 23 Tundras and Lexus LS vehicles due to a potential engine failure issue. It's kind of a similar issue. There's machining debris that was left in the engine during manufacturing, and it can cause crankshaft main bearing failure. Again, it's that main bearing, and there's very tight tolerances in the engine, and it's where the connecting rods, which are connected to the piston itself, is connected to the crankshaft. There's a bearing there that the connecting rod spins around on, and it has to be properly lubricated, and there can't be any foreign matter in there at all, or it eats through the bearing and the engine fails. Now, some people are pursuing lemon law cases on these. Others are having their engines replaced by a Toyota dealer. So if you own a Toyota Tundra in this time frame, then you need to contact the Toyota dealer and find out if your VIN number is in the sequence of the ones that are having problems. So, as high of a quality provider that everybody thinks Toyota is, you would not think that they would have a serious engine problem like this. But, 15, 20 years ago, they were having problems with frames rusting through on Toyotas. So it's not an isolated case. Every manufacturer has issues. As many cars are produced, and they're produced by humans, it's amazing that we don't have more than we already do. But don't ignore recall notices. If you get a special bulletin for you to come and get your vehicle inspected, do it. Don't wait, because if you wait, you miss the window where they're willing to pay for it, and then it's on you. So this is something that's important to do. And then the most recent situation with engine failures is with General Motors. They have a bunch of different vehicles: the Chevy Silverado, the GMC Sierra, the Yukon, the Tahoe, the Suburban, anything that has the 6.2-liter V8 L87 engine. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is investigating engine failures in these vehicles, and this is a big number. This is 877,710 GM vehicles that are affected by this, including, I left off the Cadillac Escalade. It's also included in this. Now, in this particular case, it's even more serious because it can lead to a crash. The engine can lock up while you're driving the thing, which would lock up the rear wheels and you lose control of the vehicle. And again, this stems from manufacturing defects. I can't help but wonder if a lot of this is still another ramification of the pandemic and trying to ramp up production too rapidly and causing, a lot of quality issues to pop up. I mean, it's just a thought that I had that maybe that's part of the cause, because it's seemingly widespread. We haven't had anything with Ford yet, nothing with Nissan. Those are our two brands. I haven't heard any major engine recalls for really anybody else, Honda, Subaru, or even Stellantis. But again, the important thing is to make sure that your particular VIN number is not involved. Now, if you don't have a 6.2-liter V8 engine in your GM vehicle, and you have like the 5.7-liter or some other liter, then you don't have to worry about this. It's not affected. And the way you could tell is to look under the hood. There's a label under there that tells you what engine you have, or look in your glove box. Maybe you retained your window sticker. We were looking at a Suburban that we were trying to trade for, and I was concerned that it had the 6.2. We opened the door, opened the glove box with the customer's permission, and they had the window sticker there. We pulled it out, and it didn't have that engine in it. So, it's safe to trade for that vehicle. If you buy something used and this engine hasn't been replaced, it's in the sequence and it's not been done, then you've got to get it done. You're going to be without your vehicle. And I'm sure that GM, I hope that they're making accommodations for folks to provide, of course it'll be covered under warranty, and they hopefully will provide substitute transportation. It may not be a truck. It may not be a Suburban. It might be something. It might be a Kia. I hope not. But at least you'd have something that you can get around with. And if you get these engine repairs done, whether it's a Hyundai, a Kia, a Tundra, or one of these GM vehicles, make sure that you get copies of the repair orders showing that the work was done, and keep it in your glove box. Because when somebody does that, it certainly gives the buyer a certain degree of confidence. If you can pull out a book that shows that you've written down every time you had your oil changed and what you had done to your car, and you have all the repair orders, any type of work that was ever done, whether it's body work, which you would hopefully have pictures of whatever damage that you had, all of that adds value to your vehicle, and people just don't realize it. They take the repair order and they either throw it away or they stick it in a file at home and they forget where it is. And it's important to do that because, like I say, it can increase the value of your vehicle if people know what has been done to it and know that the vehicle's been taken care of. Okay, I'll take my last break and I'll be back here in just 1 minute. Well, it looks like Congress is going to take California to the woodshed over their plan to bar gasoline-only vehicles by 2035. That rule has been adopted by 11 other states as well. But the leader of the Senate, Mr. John Thune, said that the House of Representatives approved the legislation on May 1, and so it's now the Senate's turn. So anyway, the demand for EVs have fallen off dramatically. And it's going to happen over time, but it's just not going to happen at the pace that they could hit it by 2035 and not have any gas-powered vehicles. Subaru is jacking up prices on several models. The company said this past Monday the latest automaker to pass along cost increases to consumers as their expenses are increased due to the tariffs. They're not blaming the tariffs, though. They're saying it's because of current market conditions. Nissan has said that they're going to hold off until July before they have any increases. Every manufacturer in America is going to have to increase prices to a certain degree. But one of the things that we've already seen is Nissan is going to move production of the Sentra to Canton, Mississippi from Mexico. That's a good thing. That was the purpose of all of this, is to get automakers to produce their vehicles in the United States that they're going to sell in the United States. So in order to avoid the tariffs, many companies are doing that. And it's no small number for Nissan. We're talking about their second best-selling vehicle at 152,000. So that'll add a lot of jobs to the Canton, Mississippi plant, and I think there's going to be additional production in the state of Tennessee. You know, Nissan, I mean, they are a Tennessee company. The headquarters for Nissan is in Nashville, or just south of Nashville in Franklin. And most of their production, their highest volume vehicles, are produced in the United States, in Tennessee. You know, and a lot of people think that, well, if you move all this production to the United States, isn't it going to make the cars a lot more expensive because we have to pay the workers more? Not really. Automobile labor costs typically make up only about 5 to 10% of the total cost of producing a vehicle, with the most recent estimates clustering somewhere around 7%. So for most mass-market vehicles, labor is a pretty small portion of the total production cost compared to materials and components. So the net effect of moving production back to the United States is not that great. But the benefit to the country is tremendous, because it not only benefits the local communities where these assembly plants are, but multiple communities all over because of all the suppliers. The suppliers that can relocate to Tennessee, for example, with Nissan, instead of having to be spread all over the Southwest, where they can provide all of these plants in Mexico with the parts that they need to assemble vehicles. These vehicles will be assembled in Tennessee, and it will create more jobs for Tennesseans. I think that's a beautiful thing, don't you? So we're choosing to fail forward, right? Move ahead. Leave the past behind, but learn from it. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. If you need me, send me a text, 423-552-2020, or send me an email to lennylawson2020@gmail.com. And I'll see you on the next edition of My Car Guru.